Welcome back to Newsmaker Live. Thank you very much for being part of our very interesting discussion this evening. We have Bishop Emmanuel McLaurin of the Fellowship of Gospel Preaching Churches, and also our social activist, co-founder of RISE, Dr. Stephen King, and it's very, very, very good to have you here. I am enjoying the discussion, as I thought I would. probably having even more fun than I imagined earlier on. Yes, but we have kind of come to some common ground on the issue of prostitution. I'm not saying that we are in agreement, but at least we have come to some common ground as far as the issue.
Dialogue can happen.
Exactly. We're talking about, you know, the important thing being the victim, the prostitute, who might not see a way out of it, who might want to see a way out of it but can't at this point.
And don't forget the important the roots. I mean, protecting children from child abuse and dealing with child abuse, having a zero tolerance for child abuse in our communities. I mean, that is a critical factor as well, and putting those support services in place to protect our children and nurture our children in the way. So let's not lose sight of the root problem too.
Now, I want to raise an issue of hypocrisy here. There are certain people who have been crying, you know, against Dr. King and those who share his philosophy, and even those who call for legalization and saying, oh, you're bad people, you're going straight to hell. You know, they're not even going to make you change your clothes before you go there. You just go in just as you are. You know,
Go straight to hell.
there's some of these people are those who go around, you know, abusing women, not in the sense of prostitutes, but, you know, have multiple women, you know, who cheat, who steal, who lie, who defraud, you know, but still, well, as far as I'm concerned, the last time I checked, these were all sins. But they're the ones shouting the loudest, you know, you can't be introducing prostitution, you cannot be supporting prostitution, you're a bad person. I mean, how do we address those people, and how do we change the mindset of society to make people realize that sin is sin is sin?
Yeah.
And all of us need to be helped.
I'll go first, Bishop, if you allow me. Because, yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of real negative stuff thrown at me since this debate started. And it can be hard. It can be a little bit painful, especially when you feel inside of you. And in fact, I often tell people, you have to do what your conscience tells you. My conscience, I had my call to conscience on this one, right? And I realized it's not popular. It's not a popular opinion. It's not a safe opinion, right? But I think it's a very important one, because I think there are vulnerable people out there that need the protection and need the help and need the support. And some of us have to stand. So those that try to shout it down and say that people like me will go to hell, well, maybe so, maybe so. But if I do go to hell, rest assured I'm going to hell with my integrity, right? And believing that I tried to do what my conscience dictated I should do, right? What my conscience told me was right, as far as I have seen. Because I've seen something, and I say the solution public needs to see this too. You may reject the ideas. You may say that I totally disagree, but at least let me say this is what I see, and then you can reject it, right? Sending me to hell, well, that's all. That's part of it, I guess.
I see two extremes in the hypocrisy. I see an extreme with the church who become very dogmatic from that religious perspective and become a judge of everybody and do not look at the social implications, the environment that the person is coming from, and try to help that person out of it. And so, and like you're saying also, that they might be the practicing of other sins that we do not put such a great demand on persons living right on. And because within the structure you have fornication, and you have, which is still a sin in the Bible, and there's a whole lot of stuff, even lying and theft. That's something that we do not put a heavy on. So we have that hypocrisy, which I think the mindset of the church must be open, and those who are propagating this, when say, listen, this is not the only sin. while prostitution, when the Bible is clear on it, and I need to say that it's clear that this is sin, this is wrong, this is against God's law. And then it was so strong in Leviticus that any money that was gained from prostitution was not supposed to put in the money, and if it was put in the collection, it was supposed to be taken out. Prostitution was punishable by stoning in some cases. So that was a strong case. But like we find out that Jesus himself taught us that, listen, if the person is ready to change, if the person is ready to make a change, then they must be embraced. They must not be condemned, but embraced.
Right.
If they're ready to be changed, if they're ready to move from the journey.
But even before that, if you go back to the story of the prostitute who was caught in the act, and Jesus approached the men and said, "He who is without sin cast the first stone." So whether you're engaging in prostitution or not, you're sinning. So therefore you cannot judge.
Yes.
Judgment is left to God.
And sadly, some of those guys might have been involved in the same practice.
Exactly.
You carry the prostitution all by yourself. But the other extreme, so we have that extreme with that holy and thou and dogmatic approach, and everybody wants to kill because somebody wants to show that, okay, we are saying for the righteous stuff. And like we say, re-emphasizing, yes, the Bible's clear on it. But we have the other extreme where a person is trying for legalization, decriminalization. They go to all the whole extreme. But here they don't, I pick up something that almost they don't respect the human nature, that person, that woman, and they're just going at all costs. Let us legalize it, and don't regard that there is a woman. And the question you ask sometimes, would you want to go to the extreme to push to that extreme when if it is your mother or your sister that is going to be involved in the act, are you going to make it so easy so that a person could just live that lifestyle, and stuff like that? So I see the other extreme, and I see the debates, and I was sometimes I listen to somebody that I'm appalled at it because they move from the really meat of the matter, maybe the violation of a person, a murdering of a person, a killing of a person, the abuse of a child. They move just to the issue. Okay, listen, if you decriminalize this is what's going to happen and stuff like that. So I see another extreme, and to me, we need to find that balance. The person may have transgressed, and it's not the only sin, because we have sin in many ways in our society that is not dealt with, and so we need to deal with that sin situation. But at the same time, we need to love that person and see we bring them to know Jesus Christ, or come to change the way, or behavioral change. They might not choose to know Jesus Christ. But if they could bring them to a behavioral change, that they could change their part and help them in some way to move in a different way. So I see a true hypocrisy happening within society. And I think that, and again, we need to put our heads down. And that's why I'm agreeing with him on the point. Let science come together. Let church come together. Government come together. Let us tackle the issues. And I heard him say, Dr. King says, well, we agree that, listen, we cannot just wholesale borrow modules from outside there and do not deal with the realities on the ground in St. Lucia. Let us do a feasibility study, if that's so to speak, and let us look at what's happening, and let's deal with some of those issues, and let everybody come on deck, and let's see how we can help go. We would not be able to eradicate everything, but then we'll begin to heal in some areas in our society.
I like that word heal, because that's what we need to do. We need to heal, and that's very important. And in terms of hypocrisy, it's interesting. I remember in a previous debate, national debate, I was saying that, the zone of hypocrisy is defined by the word but.
Okay.
So when you say, I would do this, but, that's usually, I have discovered, is usually, when I'm saying that, I'm in the zone of hypocrisy. And that's where I come back to this particular law, this particular section, the 151. I love this program, but I won't bother change this law, which, of course, realize the law is a barrier, because how do we now treat with people who are criminals? What are we supposed to do? So what if some mischievous person decides, well, I'm going to arrest this person that you have here that you're dealing with because she's a known prostitute. The law says she should go to jail. I'm going to take her down. I'm not saying that would happen, but if you think about it, the law is framed that way.
Right.
I know the law is much more difficult to enforce than that, as police will tell you. This is a very difficult law to enforce. In fact, we are arguing to keep a law on the books that it's almost a ludicrous section, right? You can hardly enforce it. It's hardly ever been enforced, but we are arguing. Now, I don't think really, at the end of the day, I don't think the clause or the section is all that significant, I think what's a lot more significant is our fare. the fear that if we send a message that we are endorsing that prostitution is correct, that we will open up a floodgate and we'll become a very immoral people. I think that is one of the fears that is speaking here. And I think clearly if we look at our programs carefully, we can deal with those fears. Because I don't think that is necessarily so. I do agree with Bishop McLaurin. I don't agree with a complete free-for-all, let's just, like New Zealand, for instance, has legalized, it's probably the most free with regards to its prostitution laws, right? I mean, prostitutes there can get occupation, health, and safety, and they're like ordinary workers.
Ordinary workers, yes.
Right? And they can be all over the place. I don't think that is it. And even some of those countries are beginning to wonder whether they've really done the right thing. So I personally don't endorse that particular way. But so we have to find that middle road, right? And we have to do it, I think, in a non-hypocritical way. And we must have the courage of our convictions. If we have put our minds together, and back to that tough-minded, if we put our minds together, we've come up with a good plan, and we realize that this clause is in the way, or this section is in the way, then we should have the courage of our convictions to say, well, change it. If this is in the way of doing the right thing, change it. That has been my argument.
Now, the religious sector, we expect that religious people, men of the cloth, would take that position, from that standpoint, that they will not support prostitution, whether it's decriminalization, whether it's legalization, whether it is turning a blind eye to it. But what amazes me sometimes is that the clergy says absolutely nothing about everything. Nothing is said, Children get abused all the time. You reveal some statistics there. There is no hue and cry about that. 40% of our young people say that their first sexual encounter was forced. There is no big uproar about that. There is a lot of neglect, and we see it every day. All we have to do is just take a walk and we see it around us. How many of the inner cities that do we see the churches in? What are the churches doing? And then we come to an issue like prostitution, and everybody wants to speak out on prostitution. I mean, what really is the church's position?
Yeah, I think the church has a clear position. Again, just like you were talking about the law, is to be able to enforce. And I think the church has a clear position. I might agree with you, that while it is articulated behind the pulpit, I think it needs to reach beyond the pulpit. It needs to get into the community, because it's easy on a Sunday, on a Sabbath, or midweek service to belch out your views from the converted, or your choir members talking to them about the same, who might not be involved in that deviant behavior that you were talking about, but you're just latching out from that angle. But I think the way that the church falls short, I think the church has a strong message within its walls, but I think it now has to reach outside of its walls and deal with the issues with regards to incest, one of the issues that is strong in our society, incest.
And the churches too.
Yes, and even the churches, because the persons from the churches come from communities. And so you have strong incest roots that needs to be addressed. We have child abuse that is strong within this, and a whole lot of even family abuse, spousal abuse, and a lot of stuff that's happening within. So I think the church now takes it into the communities, where they can actually begin to go into maybe town hall meetings and whatever you want to call it, or whatever community meetings you can organize, so you can now deal with some of those issues. So I feel they have a strong voice within the walls, but I think we have not taken the message outside the way we're supposed to, and not only about prostitution, but we must cry about all the other ills that are within society.
I agree, and I think the church has a lot of resources that can be brought to bear to really, in a very tangible way, support people who are in difficult situations, or vulnerable people, be they in prostitution or be they families that are in crisis. Because the families in crisis, if you look at the poverty assessment reports, it's telling you that is where the child abuse is going to occur. I remember that second stream of women I spoke about who have multiple partners. That is a kind of household as well where the children are very prone and very vulnerable to being abused, sexually and otherwise. So, the church has a lot of resources it can bring to bear, a lot of ways it can create opportunity for people. So I think I quite agree. Tell the church, let's get out the walls, get out there into the communities, work with the state, work with the civil society. Let's move.
We're heating up here on Newsmaker Live. We're discussing prostitution. We'll take a break right now. When we come back, we'll have more discussion and we'll also be taking your calls. Stay with us. We'll continue right after this.